Welcome. This is the story of a husband betrayed. But don't let his silence fool you. His revenge is legendary. Enjoy. Silas Thorne was a man who lived by the rule of the level and the plumb line. As an architectural draftsman, his world was defined by precision, straight lines, reinforced concrete, and the unwavering belief that if you built something correctly, it would stand forever. He applied that same logic to his marriage with Elena. For 5 years, he believed they were the perfect structure. He provided the stability, the quiet evenings, and the unwavering support, while Elena provided the color and the energy. But lately, the blueprints of their life had begun to warp. It started with the Saturdays. Elena, a high-flying marketing consultant with a taste for the finer things, suddenly developed a deep interest in collaborative weekend workshops. She claimed she was working with Chloe, a woman Silas knew she secretly despised for being superficial. Yet, every Saturday at 4 p.m., Elena would pack a designer overnight bag, kiss Silas on the cheek, and vanish until Sunday morning. "It's for the future, Silas," she'd say, her eyes bright with an intensity he hadn't seen in years. "Chloe has the connections, and I have the strategy. We're building a boutique agency. You want me to be successful, don't you?" Silas, being the reliable husband, a title he once wore with pride but was starting to feel like a collar, would always nod. "Of course, Elle. Do what you need to do." He spent those Saturdays in their quiet suburban home, the silence echoing off the walls he had helped design. He tried to convince himself that he was being a modern, supportive partner. But a nagging feeling, like a hairline crack in a load-bearing wall, began to grow in his chest. The first real sign of decay happened on a rainy Tuesday. Elena had left her iPad open on the kitchen island. A notification popped up, a message from Chloe. It read, "The reservation for the strategy session is confirmed for Saturday. Don't forget the black dress. He's looking forward to the presentation." Silas stared at the screen. A black dress for a marketing meeting? He felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. When he asked Elena about it later, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, Silas, don't be so provincial," she laughed, tossing her hair. "We're meeting a high-end client at a private lounge. You have to look the part to get the contract. You wouldn't understand the corporate hustle. You spend all day looking at floor plans." Her words stung. She was beginning to look at him not as a partner, but as a piece of furniture, reliable, sturdy, but ultimately boring. As the weeks passed, the workshops became more frequent. Elena began coming home on Sundays, smelling of expensive smoke and a heavy, masculine cologne that made Silas's stomach turn. She was distant, her phone always face down on the table, her smiles practiced and hollow. Silas felt a deep, gnawing depression settling over him. He started losing weight. His work suffered. He would sit at his drafting table for hours, staring at a single line, wondering where the rot had started. He wasn't a confrontational man. He preferred to observe, to gather data. He noticed how she would take private calls in the garden, her voice low and melodic, a tone she hadn't used with him in 2 years. He noticed the new jewelry she claimed were knockoffs from Chloe, though they caught the light with the unmistakable fire of real diamonds. The breaking point came when he found a receipt in the pocket of her laundry. It wasn't for office supplies or a business lunch. It was for a luxury suite at a hotel downtown, dated 3 weeks ago. A Saturday she claimed she was locked in Chloe's basement, working on a deadline. Silas sat on the edge of the tub, the small slip of paper trembling in his hand. He felt a wave of nausea so strong he had to grip the sink. The woman he loved, the woman he had worked 60-hour weeks for so she could have her dream kitchen and her designer bags, was treating him like a fool. He felt small. He felt pathetic. He realized then that he didn't really know Elena at all. He knew the version of her she allowed him to see, the loving wife mask she wore when she needed her mortgage paid. Behind that mask was a stranger who was systematically dismantling their life. That night, Silas didn't sleep. He watched the moonlight shift across the ceiling. He thought about their wedding day, the promises of forever, and the way she had looked at him then. Was it all a lie? Or had he simply become so reliable that he had become invisible? He decided he couldn't live in the dark anymore. He didn't want to be the guy who ignored the cracks until the roof fell in. He needed to see the truth for himself, even if it destroyed him. The following Saturday, when Elena packed her bag and gave him that same rehearsed kiss, Silas didn't stay on the couch. He didn't order pizza. He waited until her taillights disappeared around the corner. Then he grabbed his keys. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't a spy. He wasn't a hero. He was just a husband who needed to know if his life was a ghost story. He followed her, staying 3 cars back, his hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. He watched as she bypassed Chloe's neighborhood entirely and headed toward a wealthy enclave on the outskirts of the city, a place where the houses were hidden behind tall hedges and iron gates. As he pulled up to the curb a block away, he saw the flickering lights of a party. He saw the expensive cars lining the street, and he saw Elena, wearing that black dress, stepping out of her car with a radiant, predatory smile that she hadn't given him in years. Silas sat in the dark, the engine idling, feeling the last of his world crumble. He was depressed, he was broken, but beneath the sadness, a small, cold spark of resolve began to flicker. Silas sat in the suffocating silence of his car for 10 minutes. The bass from the house vibrated through his seat, a rhythmic thumping that felt like a headache taking root. He felt like he was hovering outside his own body, watching a pathetic man named Silas Thorne contemplate the ruins of his dignity. He was a draftsman. He knew that once a structure's integrity was compromised, there was no patching it. You had to tear it down to the dirt. The walk to the front door felt like a journey through a fever dream. The driveway was a graveyard of luxury SUVs and Italian sports cars. Silas, in his sensible sedan and weather-worn jacket, looked like a glitch in a high-definition movie. As he approached the entrance, the smell of expensive tobacco and ozone hit him. He didn't knock. He pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped into the belly of the beast. The interior was a sprawling, open-concept nightmare of glass and chrome. Dozens of people, the city's elite, the people Elena always talked about wanting to impress, were scattered across the room. The air was thick with the scent of gin and the sharp, metallic tang of cold laughter. Silas stood in the foyer, blinking against the strobe lights. He felt exposed, like a blueprint pinned to a board for critique. "Hey, look who finally showed up," a voice boomed. A man in a tailored navy blazer, holding a crystal tumbler, stumbled slightly as he walked toward Silas. He had the glassy-eyed stare of someone 4 drinks deep into a very good night. He looked Silas up and down, a slow, mocking grin spreading across his face. "Wait, wait," the man shouted, turning back to the room. "Is this him? Is this the legendary, reliable husband?" The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. Heads turned. Eyes, judging, amused, pitying, locked onto Silas. A ripple of snickering moved through the crowd. "The guy who stays home and keeps the lights on," someone yelled from the balcony. "The saint of the suburbs," another added, followed by a chorus of clinking glasses. Silas felt a flush of heat rise to his face. It wasn't just that she was cheating. It was that he was a joke. He was the punchline to a story she had been telling these people for months. He wasn't a partner. He was an anecdote used to make her life seem more daring by comparison. "Where is she?" Silas asked, his voice sounding thin and foreign to his own ears. The man in the blazer leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive juniper. "Don't be a buzzkill, man. She's upstairs networking. She told us you'd be tucked in bed by 9 with a glass of warm milk. You're ruining the vibe." He let out a sharp, barking laugh and clapped Silas on the shoulder. But hey, she did say you were reliable. Most guys would have checked the GPS months ago. You're a slow burner, aren't you? Silas shook the man's hand off his shoulder. The depression that had weighed him down for weeks suddenly crystallized into a cold, hard diamond of focus. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't respond to the jeers. He walked toward the staircase, each step a deliberate act of defiance against the man he used to be. The second floor was quieter, the air cooler. The hallway was lined with closed doors, but he didn't have to guess which one to open. He could hear it. Not the business strategy Chloe had promised. Not the passion project Elena had lied about. It was the sound of a woman who was entirely comfortable in her betrayal. A soft, breathless laugh that ended in a sigh. Silas reached the master bedroom door. He paused for a heartbeat, his hand hovering over the handle. He knew that once he opened this door, the 5 years of his life he had spent building a home would officially be a waste of time. He took a breath, turned the knob, and stepped inside. The room was bathed in the soft amber glow of designer lamps. Elena was there, still in that black dress, but it was disarrayed. She was draped across a chaise lounge, laughing as a man Silas recognized as Julian, a high-level executive from her firm, whispered something into her ear while holding a bottle of champagne. The silence that followed Silas's entry was absolute. Elena's laughter died in her throat. She didn't scream. She didn't scramble to cover herself. She simply froze, her eyes widening until the whites showed all around her pupils. Julian looked up, annoyed at the interruption, until he saw the expression on Silas's face. "Silas," Elena's voice was a ghost of a whisper. What are you doing here?" "I was just checking the foundation," Silas said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I heard there were some cracks." "Silas, listen," she said, finally standing up, her poise returning as she realized he wasn't going to get violent. She began to smooth her dress, her face shifting from shock to a familiar, cold irritation. "It's not what it looks like. We were celebrating a huge win. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd get all insecure and reliable on me." "Is that the story you told everyone downstairs?" Silas asked. "The one where I'm the stupid who stays home while you find night partners?" Elena flinched at the phrase. She looked at Julian, who was now standing, looking bored and slightly embarrassed. "Look, buddy," Julian started. "Maybe you should just go home and—" "I am home," Silas interrupted, looking at Elena. "Because everything in our life was built on my work. My name is on the mortgage. My name is on the accounts you've been draining." "Oh, please," Elena snapped, her guilt instantly turning into aggression. This was her defense mechanism. When caught, attack. "Don't act like the martyr. You were boring, Silas. You were a chore. I needed life, I needed excitement, and you were just a blueprint. If you want a divorce, fine. But don't think for a second you're walking away with anything. I've already talked to Chloe. We have records of your instability and your emotional neglect. I'll take this house and everything in it." Silas didn't argue. He didn't cry. He looked at the woman he had loved for half a decade and realized she was a stranger he had accidentally invited into his life. "We're leaving," Silas said. "What?" "I'm leaving, and you're coming with me to get your things. We are ending this tonight." The drive home was a nightmare of screaming and crying, fake tears that turned into venomous insults the moment Silas didn't react. When they finally reached their house, Elena transformed again. She realized the reliable husband wasn't following the script. He wasn't begging for an explanation. He was just done. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked, throwing a vase against the wall. "I am Elena Thorne. I made you. Without me, you're just a guy in a cubicle." Silas just stood there, watching her ruin the living room. "I'm not a blueprint, Elena," he said softly. "I'm the architect, and I just decided to condemn this building." He went to the guest room and locked the door, leaving her to her rage. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text to his friend Max. "The inspection is over. It's a total loss. Start the demolition." The next morning, the house was silent, but the air was thick with the scent of burnt bridges. Silas emerged from the guest room to find the living room a disaster zone, glass shards from the broken vase glinting like diamonds in the morning sun. Elena was gone, likely to Chloe's to plot her next move. Silas didn't clean up. He didn't fix anything. He sat at the kitchen table and waited for the man who knew how to turn a tragedy into a strategy. When Max arrived, he didn't offer a hug or a platitude. He dropped a heavy leather briefcase on the table and poured himself a cup of Silas's cold coffee. Max had seen it all: the betrayals, the hidden accounts, the monsters that emerge when a marriage dies. "She's already filed for a temporary restraining order and a freeze on the joint accounts," Max said, checking his phone. "She's fast, Silas. She's painting you as the unstable husband who snapped and started stalking her. She's going for the house, the firm, and a massive alimony check based on emotional trauma." Silas looked at his friend. For the first time, he didn't look depressed. He looked hollowed out, which made him dangerous. "Let her. In fact, let's help her." Max arched an eyebrow. "Explain." "She thinks I'm the reliable husband, predictable, weak, and easily manipulated," Silas said, his voice a low, steady hum. "I'm going to give her exactly what she expects. I'm going to play the broken man. I'll let her think she's winning every battle while we win the war." The victim protocol. The public face. Silas began a sad boy campaign. He posted cryptic, heartbroken status updates. He was seen at the local park staring at the ducks for hours. He looked unkempt, his eyes perpetually red. The financial bait. He accidentally left a laptop open with a spreadsheet showing a hidden inheritance he didn't actually have. A fake trail leading to a non-existent $200,000. The silent house. He stayed in the guest room, moving like a ghost. When Elena returned to pack more clothes, he would simply stare at the floor and whisper, "I'm sorry I wasn't enough," whenever she insulted him. Elena took the bait greedily. To her, Silas's collapse was proof of her superiority. She became incredibly sloppy. She started bringing Julian to the house while Silas was sleeping in the guest room. She laughed loudly about how she was going to bleed him dry and use his own business commissions to fund her and Julian's new venture. What she didn't know was that Max had turned the house into a digital net. Every room had a voice-activated recorder hidden inside everyday objects: an air purifier, a decorative clock, a power strip. One night, Silas sat in the guest room with headphones on, listening to a live feed from the kitchen. "The lawyer says if we can prove he's mentally unfit, the prenup is void," Elena's voice rang out, followed by the clink of wine glasses. "And the inheritance?" Julian's voice was slick, like oil on water. "It's there," Elena giggled. "The stupid left his spreadsheet open. Once I get the house, I'll claim he hid assets during the marriage. The judge will hand it to me as a penalty. He's so depressed he won't even show up to the hearing." Silas felt a chill, but he didn't flinch. He was recording it all: the conspiracy to commit fraud, the admission of hiding her own assets, and the mocking laughter. But Max found something even better. "Silas, look at this," Max said a few days later, showing him a series of bank transfers Chloe had facilitated. "She wasn't just starting an agency. She was using your firm's proprietary designs, blueprints you drew, and selling them to a rival developer under a shell company. This isn't just cheating. This is corporate espionage and theft." Silas stared at the screen. The reliable husband had been funding his own replacement. Elena hadn't just broken his heart. She had been trying to dismantle his entire professional life. "The court date is in 3 days," Max said, a grim smile on his face. "She thinks she's going in there to finalize a victory. She's invited her friends, Chloe, and even Julian to the gallery to watch your downfall. She wants to humiliate you one last time." "Good," Silas said, standing up and finally shaving for the first time in weeks. "Let them all come. I want a full house for the grand opening." As the day of the hearing approached, Silas returned to his broken persona. He showed up to the courthouse in a suit that was slightly too large, looking like a man who had lost his soul. Elena walked past him in the hallway, smelling of victory and expensive perfume, her heels clicking like a countdown. She didn't even look at him. She just whispered, "Goodbye, Silas. Try not to cry in front of the judge." Silas didn't respond. He just sat on the wooden bench, his head bowed, while Max sat next to him, a laptop tucked under his arm like a concealed weapon. The doors to the courtroom opened. It was time for the show to begin. The courtroom was cold, smelling of floor wax and old paper. Elena sat at the petitioner's table, flanked by a high-priced attorney who looked like he'd never lost a day in his life. In the gallery, Chloe and a few of the party friends sat in the front row, whispering and casting pitying glances at Silas. Julian was there too, leaning back with a smug, proprietary air. To everyone in that room, Silas Thorne was a dead man walking. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Miller, peered over her spectacles. "Mr. Thorne, you are appearing with counsel, Mr. Maxwell? Are we ready to discuss the division of assets and the allegations of emotional instability?" Elena's lawyer stood up, his voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor, my client has endured months of neglect and erratic behavior. We have documentation of Mr. Thorne's stalking, his mental decline, and most importantly, evidence that he has been hiding substantial assets in a secret account. We are asking for the house, the firm, and a significant portion of those hidden funds as restitution." Elena dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She looked like the picture of a grieving, betrayed woman. "Mr. Maxwell?" the judge prompted. Max stood up slowly. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at Elena. "Your Honor, we agree that this marriage was a structure built on lies. However, we disagree on who the architect of those lies was. We'd like to present a site inspection of the last 3 months." Max opened his laptop and connected it to the courtroom's projector. The first thing that played wasn't a document. It was audio, crystal clear audio from the night of the party. "Is this him? The legendary reliable husband? The guy who stays home and keeps the lights on?" The courtroom went silent. Elena's hand froze mid-air. The laughter of her friends, recorded in high definition, filled the room. Then, the audio shifted to the bedroom. Silas's calm voice, followed by Elena's sharp, venomous transition from remorseful wife to predatory monster. "I'll take every cent you've ever saved. I'll ruin your career before you can draw another line on a map." Judge Miller's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Maxwell, what is the source of this?" "Voice-activated security in the marital home, Your Honor," Max said calmly. "But it gets better. Let's talk about the hidden assets my client supposedly kept." He flipped to a screen, showing the spreadsheet Silas had accidentally left open. "This was bait, Your Honor. There is no inheritance. But the fact that Mrs. Thorne and her associates, specifically Mr. Julian Vane, sitting in the front row, discussed how to seize these fake funds proves a conspiracy to commit fraud." Elena's lawyer tried to object, but Max was a steamroller. "And finally," Max said, his voice dropping an octave, "the matter of the boutique agency. We have the digital trail of Mrs. Thorne stealing copyrighted architectural blueprints from her husband's firm and selling them to a competitor. We have the offshore account records. We have the texts where she calls her husband a boring blueprint, while she launders his hard-earned money. The projected screen showed a series of bank transfers and emails. Elena's face didn't just turn pale, it turned gray. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, trying to hide behind her handbag. Julian stood up and tried to quietly exit the courtroom, but a bailiff signaled for him to sit back down. Silas finally stood up. He didn't look broken anymore. He looked like the man who had designed skyscrapers, tall, precise, and immovable. "I gave you 5 years of my life, Elena," Silas said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "I was reliable because I believed in the foundation we built. You didn't just break the house. You tried to steal the land it sat on." The judge looked at the evidence for 20 minutes in total silence. When she looked up, her gaze was like a laser. "In 20 years on the bench," Judge Miller said, "I have rarely seen such a calculated, malicious attempt to ruin a spouse. The prenuptial agreement is upheld, but the infidelity and fraud clauses are now fully activated." The verdict: the house. Silas kept it. The assets. Elena was ordered to return every cent she had funneled into the offshore accounts, plus interest. The firm. Silas retained full ownership, and Elena was barred from the industry pending a criminal investigation into the stolen blueprints. Alimony. Denied. In fact, Elena was ordered to pay Silas's legal fees. As the gavel slammed down, the monster finally broke. Elena didn't scream this time. She just collapsed into her chair, realizing that in trying to play Silas for a fool, she had built her own prison. Silas proved that a quiet man's silence isn't weakness. It's a blueprint for justice. If you enjoyed this cold revenge, subscribe for more gripping stories on our channel. Until next time, stay sharp and keep watching.